Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. Today we're going to be talking about the Richard Heart lawsuit, how he actually beat the SEC, and what the entire ecosystem of PulseChain is looking like. We're going to be talking about the core tokens today, mapping out what their prices are going to be doing over this year, because I got a lot of confidence, guys, that as Richard Heart has actually beat the SEC, the market is going to be picking up, it's going to be outperforming the broader market, and we're going to see PulseChain as a whole catch people by surprise. I've maintained my belief that this lawsuit was bullcrap. I maintained the same belief that we were going to actually outperform the broader market, and now that the charts are showing the same similarities, I'm going to break them down today so that you guys know exactly what to expect moving forward into this year. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and if you did find any value in this video, please do me a favor, hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. Without further ado, let's jump right into this amazing video today. There's no better way to start this video than actually talking a little bit about the article where the judge dismisses the SEC case. Now, there's people talking about the idea that the SEC just threw the case out, which was not actually accurate. The federal judge dismissed it. So that's a huge difference. What this shows is that Richard Heart actually beat the SEC. If we come down here, the judge ruled that the SEC failed to prove that Hart's online statements were specifically targeted at U.S. investors, a requirement under U.S. securities law, and the participation of U.S. persons would not establish jurisdiction. The whole premise of this lawsuit was that Richard Heart targeted the American consumer base. That was not the case. He only targeted the crypto audience. If anybody would have spent 5 minutes doing a little bit of research into this lawsuit, you would have known that Richard Heart was eventually going to win. That's why when the whole broader market was announcing that Richard Heart was a scammer, that PulseChain people are stupid, that all of this stuff, you know, at the end of the day, they're the ones that actually look really dumb right now, because we all know that that's not even slightly what happened. Anybody that invested into this market knows how it worked, and it was ultimately everybody else's own doing, whether they put money into it. So you can't really blame the guy for running a sale and raising money for it, and especially when the guy's never sold a token on anybody. He raised money. If he sold some of that money for himself, who cares? That's his own money to raise and sell from. It doesn't change anybody else's opinion on the matter. XRP's been selling on everybody for however long. The Ethereum Foundation and Vitalik's been selling on everybody for however long. And so then when you've got a creator that doesn't actually sell on anybody, you guys are mad at him. It makes no sense. But if we come down here, the relevant online communications described in the complaint during the offer periods consist of untargeted, globally available information. Judge Carol Bagley Ammon wrote in her ruling, the SEC failed to plead sufficient facts to suggest that Hart's online statements were purposely directed at the United States rather than the global audience. So basically it's nothing. She threw out the case because there was no tangible evidence to support and back it. So with that being said, let's jump into the core tokens. Now that everybody was wrong about Richard Heart, we can talk about these coins in confidence. We can look and see what they're going to be doing, and I can give you guys an unbiased report now that we have a lot of confidence that we don't have to worry about this lawsuit. These coins are going to pump really hard, and I got a lot of confidence in that, guys. I was always a believer that Richard Heart was going to beat the SEC. If you looked and did a little bit of due diligence into the lawsuit, you would have known really quickly that there wasn't really anything there backing it. So for all of these people to be jumping all over PulseChain, telling everybody they're stupid and all of that, I don't need to say anymore because you guys look dumb. But when we're looking at this chart, Hex on PulseChain is going to be the prime one. If you're looking to invest in Hex, I wouldn't invest into the one on Ethereum over here. I would personally invest into the one on PulseChain because Richard Heart himself has claimed that this is the real one. He wants the people to be on PulseChain. So he wants the people to be staking Hex on PulseChain. That's what this one is. So if we're looking at this setup, in my opinion, it does look a little bit sketchy right here because you can't really deny the fact that there's an obvious head and shoulder pattern kind of sitting you in the face with volume to match and right shoulder volume. Well, even though it's not sell volume. It does have the volume to match, even though it's not technically perfect. But it can still go either way. When I look at setups like this, sometimes this looks like stitching, where when a market attempts a breakout, because the price did technically get outside of that, when the market attempts a breakout, sometimes the candles will just kind of close back and forth within the range of that same downtrending resistance level. And it won't really go one way or another. And it might even look bearish because this is a head and shoulder pattern, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to break down. If this thing breaks down, then technically your target is like a new all-time low. So sometimes when that happens, it doesn't always play out like you'd think. Sometimes it'll break down and just do something like this before reversing like that. So don't be surprised if something plays out like this at the bearish sense. If we did break down from this type of a head and shoulder, your target would literally be like clear down here, like way, way, way down here. So I just don't think that that's the likely scenario, right? When I'm looking at this setup, it looks a little bit more indecisive, like it's still trying to figure out what way it's going. Now that the resolution with the lawsuit is here, I find it likely that there's going to be people willing to at least step in and start accumulating, but we need to get off this support. The more that we're just kind of holding this horizontal support down in here, the weaker that it gets, and the more that this head and shoulder looks like it's going to kind of break down into one more final shakeout like that. So that's kind of what I'm watching for, just because it's the most obvious setup. But keep in mind, guys, that like I stated at the beginning, when you're seeing the PA and the candle bodies closing just really close within that trend line, don't be surprised if one day we wake up to this just big green candle and it closes back above and then it does something like this, because that's also equally a potential, especially with the having, you know, the broader market looking like we're going to start reversing at some point soon. Coming over here, I wanted to look at E-Hex because this is going to be the hex on Ethereum. This is the one from the last cycle that performed so well and actually hit top 3 in market cap. Most people don't realize that Hex was top 3 in market cap at the top of the last bull market. It was worth like 300 billion in market cap, so it was huge. Looking over here, Hex had that first 90% sell-off right here. Boom to boom. This was the bear market. Bitcoin bottomed, Ethereum bottomed, and we started to begin that new cycle, and then PulseChain went live. And the issue with PulseChain going live was it fractured the community. And so it went live and half of the community sold all of their E-Hex in pursuit of buying this when it listed on the PulseChain ecosystem. Because keep in mind that Richard Hart forked Ethereum. So this was on Ethereum along with all of the other tokens on Ethereum. So when he forked it, it duplicated Hex. And this is the version that's duplicated on PulseChain. So when we're looking at E-Hex, honestly, I think that this thing has just gotten smashed in every way. That's why it had this big sell-off here. It got inflated, and so everybody sold their E-Hex and went over into P-Hex, fractured the community there. It started to round out and looked like it was going to reverse, and then Richard Hart came out here and said that it wasn't the real version and that you should all move your money into P-Hex, and then it dropped another 90% right here. So it's been really just kind of crapped on the whole cycle, but for those reasons, it's actually looking a lot better than P-Hex. Even though, you know, this head and shoulder is kind of similar, in my opinion, it's not the same. This looks like it's kind of holding better support, like it wants to start a high like this and actually run all the way back up to this resistance. And I'm not going to be surprised if this thing actually starts to do that and if it actually front runs P-Hex in the short term a little bit. This thing looks a little sketchy, whereas E-Hex actually looks a little bit better. It looks more like a market that's kind of just rounding out before it starts to break out. So in the short term, I'm not going to be surprised if E-Hex actually outperforms it. But if we're looking at the both of them, if P-Hex bottoms here and runs to its all-time high, there's basically a 4x move right there. You know, if this thing runs to its resistance at the BankX sell wall, at that point you're basically looking at, you know, about 100% less of a move. So, you know, it's hard to say exactly which one's going to outperform. If it was just me, I would personally just focus my money on P-Hex because I do think that that's the safer bet. Richard Hart's already came out and said that this is the real version, so focus on that one in my opinion. Coming over here and taking a look at Pulse. Pulse is underperforming PulseX, and it's underperforming all of the other ones like Hex as well. This is a little bit more of a descending triangle where we have a downtrending resistance and we have a horizontal support. It doesn't really look that solid. We have this downtrend, and it's actually all the way back down here near these all-time lows. So it has good volume in here. It is looking like this will end up reversing. But the difference is it's just underperformed PulseX. If we're looking at where our price is now, if we were to go back up to the prior high, you're looking at 5x just to that next move. And to the prior all-time highs, it's going to be a 7x. So Pulse has a huge opportunity for upside in the short term and in the long term because it's all the way back at the all-time lows. If we're comparing it to the price action of PulseX, we can see that PulseX is actually having an ascending support right here. And PulseX is actually hugging a lot closer to the downtrending resistance than if we're comparing Pulse all the way back down here. It's not even close to that downtrending resistance. So PulseX has always been the better buy. If we look at PulseX against Pulse, it's always just kind of been going parabolic. And so for those reasons, I've always maintained the belief that, you know, PulseX would be the better investment. But there will come a point where that flips, right? You know, PulseX has been outperforming. You know, maybe we start to see Pulse start to reverse down in here. And once it flips this resistance here, that's where I think the outperformance happens. I'm not going to be surprised if we see PulseX actually break out first. You know, maybe this thing comes over in here, it breaks out, and it runs all the way up here to these prior all-time highs like this, and it looks like that. And maybe the price of Pulse itself is only right here. It's only just breaking out of that downtrend. At that point, it would actually be a better buy to rotate your PulseX that's sitting all the way up here, or all the way up here at the range highs. You'd be at a much better point rotating that into Pulse, because Pulse is just starting to flip that downtrending resistance. If we're talking flipping that resistance to the next high is 2.5x, to the prior all-time high is 3.5x, you know, you're at a much bigger ROI than what you will see with PulseX, in my opinion. So if we see that scenario play out, I think that you're better off rotating. But in the short term, we'll probably see PulseX continue to outperform in the way that it already has up to this point. You know, Pulse is still a good buy, but there's less of a reason for the token to go up, because currently I think that the only thing burning Pulse is pump.tires. But if we're looking at, you know, PulseX always having the buyback and burn, this thing will always be burning PulseX. So for those reasons, I think that in the short term it's the better buy. In the long term, it's been the better buy, and it's why I've told people to just focus on PulseX. Coming over here and looking at Inc to finish up this video. Inc is my favorite one. It's just the one that has the lesser market cap, even though it's got quite a bit of liquidity over here. It's the one that I think can actually outperform a lot. Looking at the volume, it has great volume. More volume over here than even what we saw in our prior last cycle. So if we're looking at that, and it's maintained support, it's never broke down once, it's looking better than all of the other tokens I've shared with you, it just further strengthens my belief on why Inc is going to be a better buy than all of the other ones. Looking at it right over in here, from where we're at today just to this next high, you're looking at like 4.5x. If we come over here and hit this resistance in the mid-cycle, that's 13.5x. If we go to the prior all-time high, you're talking 34.5x. So I honestly think that this thing will go to a new all-time high at some point. This cycle could easily do 100x. I think that PulseX can do a 50x. I think that Inc can do 100 or 200x. When it comes to Hex, man, that thing is kind of a crapshoot. I think that this thing can outperform all of them, or it could underperform all of them. It's hard to say. With the lawsuit kind of coming out, and with Richard Hart actually now staking a bunch of his Hex, I do think that Hex is a lot more attractive than I used to give it. But in my opinion, you shouldn't stake Hex. I'm not a Hex staker. I'm a Hex trader. Maybe stake Hex 1 to 2 years tops. But when we're in the last year of our bull market, you want to sell everything this year. You want to take all of your profits at the high, because you don't want to have to stomach another 90% sell-off. All of these people in these 5, 10, 15-year stakes, they're going to have to hold through another one of these. And they're going to have to just pray that Hex comes back around and has a new cycle again, and that there is a new crypto cycle, and that this isn't just the big blow off top before we have a 10-year sort of sideways accumulation like what the S&P 500 did after the internet bubble. That they have to just pray that that doesn't happen, right? And for me, I don't want to pray. I want to take all of my profits up here, and then I just want to be out of the market. So can Hex outperform all of them? I think so. There's a lot less of a supply. Richard Hart owns the majority of the supply. It takes less money to move the price because there's less liquidity than all of them. So for those reasons, I think that this thing is really worth a buy, but it's not one I'm staking. I'm not a believer in the staking. I believe it's worthy of an allocation, and that's it. I think we're going to be taking profits on all of these. I'm not holding any of them, and I'm not holding any of my crypto in the bear market as well. Locking up everything, selling it all, literally closing up shop, all of that. So, you know, this is the video I had for you guys. If you did find value in this, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know I'm a little bit of a stickler against Hex and staking. If you're a believer in it, drop a comment educating all of us as to why you think that it's going to stick around, why the institutions will adopt it, even though Richard Hart owns so much of the supply, all of those things. Because in my opinion, I just don't find it likely. It is possible, and that's why I say, get an allocation for the cycle, but we're getting in the allocation to sell. That's my premise. That's my belief. If you found value in that and you guys want to see what I'm buying, selling, trading over this cycle, you guys can actually sign up for my private group linked in the description. I'm going to be selling all of my PulseChain stuff at the end of this year. So if you guys want to be able to know when I'm taking profits on all of that, you can follow my group. Get in there, listed on my website, linked in the description, lifetime access. I'd love to have you guys in there. I'm telling you, there's a lot of people that are more focused on the staking aspect of PulseChain. I'm more focused on the profit-taking aspect of PulseChain. So if you want to follow that instead, I'd love to have you guys in there. With that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.